So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and I'd almost be tempted to call this one a siege actually, because while this map usually plays host to very simple field battles, as the battle usually takes place out there in the mists, today we are going to be seeing the encampment actually being used. I believe this map is called North Athelion. I might be wrong though, it might also be called Easterling Camp, or one of the Easterling camps anyway, because there is several variants on that name I think. But nonetheless, we will be seeing Gondor and Lindon, the very same alliance that put Angmar to the sword in Lord of the Rings' lore, face off against a triumvirate of evil factions in Harad, Isengard and Rudauer. So it will be interesting to see how this map unfolds. I do believe that Gondor and Lindon do complement one another very well, especially in a defensive situation like this, where Gondor can really shine, because obviously Lindon can then accent Gondor's more heavy infantry focus with their more sort of focus on melee skill and a lot of their more damaging units, in particular their javelins, will make a very good complement, I think, to Gondor's heavy archers in particular, who wear down the enemy at range fairly comfortably, and especially seeing as this is a 2v3, I'd imagine the defending armies will have a little bit more in the way of money to play with, although maybe not all that much. And this is a very open area to defend as well, so the attackers will have plenty of opportunities to try and make use of their superior numbers to swamp forwards and overwhelm the defenders. But we'll go through the attacking armies first of all, considering this is sort of a de facto siege in many ways. We'll start off over here with Rudauer, played by Bloodbath McGrath. Of course, I've said several times at this point in 0.97 that Rudauer are probably my favourite faction to play overall. And you can see here the Rudauer swordsmen, a very basic unit of swordsmen, and certainly in comparison to the equivalents that Gondor and Lindon have, they will not be as strong individually, but numbers is really their best asset, and also the fact that they can very easily sort of maintain their position in a melee fight even if they're not winning for quite some time because of those numbers, and their stats are not terrible even though they're not amazing either, and that of course allows Rudauer's damage dealers in their javelins and axe throwers to really get some work done, because it's hard to deal with the Rudauer swordsmen quickly enough to then close with the javelins. We also have some Dunman hunters, which are probably going to be the most common pick with regards to archers for Rudauer over the Rudauer marksmen, just because neither of Rudauer's two archers that you're going to be seeing on the front line anyway are really all about quality. They're certainly about numbers, and obviously with the nerfs essentially to cheaper archers, they're not going to be as effective as they were in 0.96.1, but it is still something that you can make use of, especially against Lindon actually, because obviously Lindon with their lower armour values, this sort of unit can still do a decent amount of damage quite quickly to them. Gondor is a different matter though, their armour really does help them against this sort of unit very nicely. Dunman Spearmen, obviously very, very basic militia spears. It's going to be difficult for them to get a lot of kills, but again, numbers will be the attacker's best friend here, because they're not going to beat out Gondor and Lindon with a bit of extra money for quality. Having said that, they do have some Franodine pikes here on the front, which is good to see, because this is certainly a pike unit which is the equal of the stuff that Gondor and Lindon have. Maybe not quite as strong in terms of damage as the Mithlon pikes from Lindon, but certainly the shields do help them, and being at the centre of the line, they do fill the same sort of role as the Wardens of Tirngorth had. He might actually have two units of them, so that's a big investment into their pikes, but perhaps he's hoping to really get involved in a slow and atrocious fight on one side. Be an interesting ploy. Franodine Berserkers over here as well, so obviously multiple HP now, so they are very strong. They throw their axes before closing into melee, so they are effectively shock infantry with shields, which is always very nice. AP as well, which is obviously something that most one-handed axemen are not. Very, very good all-around unit, but obviously now they are multiple HP, they are also quite expensive, a little bit cheaper than this unit back here, the Witch Realm Enslavers. We'll get onto them in just a second. Armour upgrades on the Rudauer Clansmen, a very, very nice unit to have in this situation when you're pushing forward into a dug-in position, because they're good at absorbing arrow fire, probably the best unit in Rudauer's roster. Most other units don't have amazing shield values, nor do they have great armour. The Rudauer Clansmen are pretty much the exception to that rule. Their armour is okay, but certainly their shield value is very nice. The Witch Realm Enslavers, which is where the General is going to be a very good unit in melee against most of the Gondorian stuff. Obviously armour-piercing shock troops, bodyguard tier with multiple HP. Very, very nice unit to have in this situation. Slightly more expensive than the Franodine Berserkers as well, because they are stronger in melee. Ultimately, they do a lot more damage. And another unit of Rudauer Clansmen on, well, with this flank anyway. And Rudauer obviously have some hidden stuff in here as well. Like, I would be amazed if they didn't bring like Trollshore axe throwers and Forodrim javelins in this sort of situation. Although the Ethelmore's Troll Hunters can't hide, I don't think, or at least they can't hide normally. And they're not in a part of the map which is heavily forested either, so they might not have brought them. Which is an interesting omission. Most people do bring the Attenmore's Troll Hunters, but we'll see. They may be hidden. It's kind of hard to tell. Then we have Isengard, played by Faka. Now, most of Isengard's army will be hidden because this is counted as a heavily forested part of the map. I'm sure that we've all seen Corrigan play on this map consistently and hide in this part of the map. So it's going to be difficult to see what most of Isengard have, but they do have their Champions of the White Hand, which I assume is their General's Bodyguard, although maybe not. I can't see the General's model here. But obviously a very, very powerful unit of anti-cavalry cavalry. They can also do a decent amount of damage off the charge, but primarily their focus is going to be on any cavalry units that Lyndon and Gondor have, both of which could be quite devastating. Gondor's lances are good, even if the rest of their cavalry isn't. And Lyndon obviously got some very nice hybrid units, as well as their devastating unit of knights. Trolls of the White Hand, they will be very useful at breaking down frontal defences as well. 3 units of Uruk-hai pikemen in here, which is completely unsurprising as well. And obviously Isengard with their pike force are going to also be the more generally going to be the match of Gondor and Lyndon in terms of pikes than Rudar. Rudar only really have one really good unit of pikes, and they've only brought that one as well, even though they have got 2. So a lot of pikes for the attackers here. Could be a field day for Gondor's archers if they are in a good position to make use of them. And then finally we have Tex Tudame XV1. He's going to be playing as Harad, so some Haradrim spearmen at the front, often brought because they're cheap and you can just send them forward and not be too concerned if they die en masse. Interesting to see the Mahud warriors as well, a cheaper version of their line infantry. Obviously Serpent Guard are more commonly brought, but the Mahud warriors are kind of similar in many ways to the Rudar swordsmen on the other side, because there are an awful lot of them. It's very difficult to hack your way through them. They've got decent attack values for what they are as well, but their defense values maybe not so great, and also their armor is almost non-existent, so they certainly have some sort of pitfalls in comparison to the dismounted Serpent Guard, but certainly a bit of an underrated unit, I think, especially in this situation where numbers are going to be key. Obviously they won't get hundreds of kills, but they could still be very useful. Mahud Berserkers, obviously, this is a unit which is very similar to any other sort of very entry-level axemen for the evil factions. Obviously you send them forward, their AP is going to be useful, but their defensive skill, and in particular their lack of armour, is going to be a problem if they come under arrow fire, so Gondor will probably be on the lookout for units like this to feast upon with their archers, but if they do get into melee, they will be useful against Gondor, as will anything else Harad has that is AP, so it's rather good that they're on this side of things. Southron Warband, also AP of course, very nice. Some Southron Pikemen. Their stats honestly are pretty poor, but the AP should be enough to make up for that, and that is obviously more pikes that the attackers have to work with in this battle. They've also got some standard Serpent Guard without the armour upgrade, but of course, the Serpent Guard armour is not their main concern anyway. Their shields are also slightly smaller, but they're better in melee than most other units of this type and cost, so if they can close into melee without getting shot up, it should be quite good for them. Some more long spear units in the Mahud Beast Tamers, and then back here we also have the Champions of Nathra and the Demons of the Desert, so 2 very high profile units that Harad can bring. Demons of the Desert in particular could be devastating if used at the right time. And then a couple of units of Southron Archers just to put some pressure on this side, but much like the Dunman Hunters on the other side, while they may not be as bad as the Dunman Hunters, that would be the Haradrim Archers, they aren't going to be a match for either Gondor or Lyndon's Archers, to be quite frank. Meanwhile, let's move on to the defenders, starting off with the player who sent me the replay, which is going to be Lango. He has got some of his units back here, which I would assume he just forgot to move back, and it's rather good for him actually that Harad doesn't have units of cavalry which are ready to pounce. He might have to worry about the Champions of the White Hand though. It is only a couple of Gondor militia archers anyway, but every little helps when you're in this sort of situation. If you're outnumbered, any little mistake can cost you as the defenders. So we'll see if the Gondor militia archers are able to scurry back to the encampment after they were scouting out, I suppose, and saw the enemy approaching them in the trees. He's got some Gondor archers with both levels of armour upgrades. Obviously Gondor's cheaper armour upgrades overall, certainly a good selling point of the faction, and that obviously makes the Gondor archers much more resilient. Obviously in terms of armour it puts them on the same level as archers which are of a higher tier than themselves, even if the damage doesn't quite follow suit. We have some Guards of Osgiliath, obviously good that they do have pikes, otherwise they could be in trouble if things got into a melee fight with all of the pikes the attackers have brought. A couple of units of Pelagia Marines. Javelins in a defensive situation like this are going to be very key, especially if they get onto the elevated terrain and do a lot of damage to the enemy as they approach. Another unit of fully upgraded Gondor archers here. A force defending this route into the encampment. A couple of units of fully upgraded Gondor infantry again. Maybe not as strong as some of the higher tier units of line infantry, but their armour does sort of make up for that. It makes them a little bit harder to kill, even if they won't necessarily do the same amount of damage as a unit of, let's say, Serpent Guard or Uruk-hai infantry or something even higher like the Alcarondas Legion. Guards of Osgiliath backing them up as well. We actually have a Gondorian ballista, so perhaps they were expecting to see the attackers bring some artillery, but that is not the case, so the ballista will actually be free to try and engage the attackers' main army. His army is kind of all over the place actually. It's got some Gondorians back here as well. 3 units of Axemen of Lasarnak, again fully upgraded. The AP will be useful against Isengard, not so much against Harad or Rudar, so we'll see how well they can do there. And then we also have a couple of units of Fountain Guard here. Is that 3 units of Fountain Guard? No, it is just the 2. So obviously very, very good phalanx units there. And then out here, out wide, we do have, if I can actually see them, yes, here we are, Mithrandir's retinue. So obviously the unit of multiple HP Lancers that Gondor have, they're very resilient. That is their unique selling point. The fact their armour and shields make them very, very tanky. Even if they aren't knights, they can still do a lot of damage. And they are going to be hiding out here waiting for the opportune moment to strike. And then I think, yes, there is another unit over here. And this is actually the Gondorian General, so the Veterans of Osgiliath. A very, very strong unit of archers, of course, even tougher at range with their shields than the Caer Andros Marksmen. And they make for good makeshift line infantry at melee as well, so that's obviously another hybrid unit Gondor have in their favour. And then finally, Silver Banshee, who's going to be playing as Linden. A couple of units of Harlinden infantry there, backed up by some 4 Linden Marines, so javelins and infantry. Very, very good for Linden, of course. And then the rest of their army is going to be up here on this hill, because their deployment zone was mainly out on that flat piece of terrain over there, and they didn't want to be there. A couple of units of Harlinden Guard. Slightly tankier than the 4 Linden Archers because of their shields, but their armour is still very low. But spears in melee, so cavalry is going to be less inclined to charge into them if they have the opportunity. Another unit of Harlinden Guard there, some Harlinden infantry over here, some Mithlond Marines, so more javelins, some Harlinden infantry also, and then back here some Mithlond Marines as well as some Mithlond pikemen, so just a single unit of pikes, but also the mighty Noldoran Blade Masters, which is where the general is going to be a very, very difficult unit to break down indeed. Certainly in terms of infantry, I think it's going to be the strongest on the field today, because I didn't actually notice really much in the way of Gondorian elites at all. He's gone for a much larger army, which could pay dividends here, because obviously he's facing off against much more in terms of numbers himself. Without further ado, let's begin. Interested to see how this battle goes, because obviously the Gondorians are very much going to have to make, well, Gondorians and the Elves, very much going to have to make use of their defensive position here, because they're facing off against 3 factions, which once again should complement each other quite nicely. The savagery of the Haradrim and Rudauer, backed up by the more solid core of Isengard. We shall see how well things go for them all. I do feel as though Gondor, one of their aces in the pack, is going to be their archers, to see if they can really do some damage on the approach. Harad in particular should be quite vulnerable to that. If you can take away a lot of their damage, you should find yourself in a pretty good place indeed. I do worry for the fact that Gondor don't seem to have a huge amount of damage, a huge amount of their higher end units in melee. The Fountain Guard is all well and good, as well as the Axemen of Lasarnak, but I would have been very tempted to bring the Ravenhelms in this situation against the Haradrim and Rudauer, and also perhaps one of the elite units of infantry as well. You'd be surprised how much work they can do if they're properly supported. But I can certainly see why he's gone for a more hefty core of archers as well. It all depends on whether he can really protect them, and also whether or not he's brought the ones that can deal enough damage or not, because I'm not seeing any Athelian Rangers. I didn't actually see any Wardens of Velos Tyrian either. Omitting Rangers would be a very bold move. They're one of the ways that you can really deal a lot of punishment to the enemy very quickly. Oh, I say that. The Wardens of Velos Tyrian just popped in. Good to see that they're there. 2 units of them as well, so making up for Gondor's perhaps lack of Rangers, although I may just be blind and missing them. But I do feel as though Rudauer has actually got the least advantageous avenue of attack, because Linden have got a huge field of fire on them as they approach. The Rangers are up on the hill. Harlinden Guard are over here, as well as some Gondorian archers as well. So while they don't have much in the way of infantry to slow them down to get into the camp properly, they will still take a huge amount of damage on the approach. And obviously Rudauer, one thing that they don't have going for them is their armour. They are quite vulnerable to enemy arrows. Over here, meanwhile, it does look as though Isengard and Harad are going to be advancing as one, which is good. You definitely want to be hitting the camp from all angles at the same time if you can possibly help it. Rudauer might be lagging behind a little bit, but that might not be the worst thing in the world. Some of these Uruk-hai pikemen are also lagging behind. Southron Warband, of course, some of the Haradrim, including the Hashari, the melee Hashari, and the Serpent's Fangs, revealing themselves. So some poison arrows and also some assassins in melee. And obviously then you see the Isengard forces also revealing themselves. Unsurprising to see the crossbows. Uruk-hai infantry, of course, the core of most Isengard attacks like this. Nazkai, Berserkers, all of the good stuff that you really want to see in this sort of situation. A lot of stuff that Gondor will be quite worried to see bearing down on them at the very least. I would say, however, that Faka really doesn't want to be leading the way with his pikes if he can help it. It's good to see that he's stopping. I was worried he would just continue to advance forward into the welcoming arms of the Gondorian archers. Yeah, it's going to be difficult, I think, this for the defenders. There are a few units which could turn the tide, the javelins, of course. Gondor Militia Archers now back in position as well. Even more so than the regular Gondor Archers, they're not really designed to deal damage, but we'll see how well they can do here. Yeah, the Gondorian and Linden Javelins, I feel as though the Wardens of Elos Tyrion will be a very key factor for the defenders, and of course the Mithrandir's retinue, hidden out in the corner over there, waiting for the opportune moment when the attackers are starting to lose a bit of steam. But I would still give the advantage to the attackers here if they're able to maintain a good assault. There's a lot of good defensive positions the defenders can take advantage of, but there are also some wider open areas, and if they can start to flood over with their numbers, Harad and Isengard are in a good position, and all Rudar really needs to do in this situation, I've been there myself, is, you know, even if it looks horrible to advance into that position, just do it when your allies are attacking as well. Put the pressure on from all angles, and even if you end up not getting many kills, or if your army ends up really starting to lose a lot of their manpower, there's the Athelian Rangers. So 3 units of Rangers. Even if your army, as I was saying, even if your army does end up losing a great deal of manpower, you're at the very least attacking from all angles, and you're allowing your allies to have the security of not necessarily being sort of ganged up on. You're being useful even if your army is dying. Being cannon fodder may be not the most glamorous role, but it is still useful. The Gondor Archers, meanwhile, going after the Lurtz Hunting Pack. Now this, I'm not really sure what they hope to accomplish. I mean, the Lurtz Hunting Pack are multiple HP, so they should be able to weather actually a decent amount of arrows, but as soon as they start to fall, it's a lot of value that you're losing, because obviously they are Rangers. Isengard Rangers, potentially very, very deadly. And it does also look like they're actually skirmishing with the Gondor Archers. This is a huge advantage for the Gondorians here. This is exactly what they would want to see. A couple of Guards of Osgiliath falling to the Lurtz Hunting Pack, but honestly, if they can trade like half a unit of Gondor Archers for completely blunting the Isengard Rangers for later in the fight, that would be a huge boon for them. In the late game, Rangers can be a real game changer for either side, and it is of course possible that Rudar have Ranadine Rangers as well. Maybe the Haradrim have also got their Hashari Stalkers, but even so, it's not really something you want to throw away. The Lurtz Hunting Pack are also good in melee. This is exactly the situation you don't want to see the Isengard Rangers engaging in. Meanwhile, we do actually have the initial engagements as Harad do start to probe the Gondorian lines, and Lango here maybe a little bit too eager to continue skirmishing with the Southron Archers. His Gondor Archers are now being engaged in melee. You can see there the Gondor Militia Archers are also skirmishing back and forth, and with all Gondor's Archers, honestly, this would be the green light for me as the attackers to just send forward your full infantry force and try and do as much damage as possible, because you're gonna find gaps eventually. We shall see how long the Gondorians can hold this front line against an assault. They will be able to hold the Haradrim Spearmen back very easily, of course. The AP on the Axemen of Lasarnak may not be terribly useful against this basic spear, but they're a superior unit in every way. And the Gondorian Axemen will be all too pleased to send these men of the south back from whence they came. And those Gondor Militia Archers standing and shooting, not too concerned about being poked by the Haradrim Spearmen, because they are almost certainly not going to be around for too much longer, although he's doing a good job there of force pathing his way through. He knows that he's more likely to kill Gondor Militia Archers in melee than he is Axemen of Lasarnak. But it's not going to be too much longer before the Haradrim Spearmen start thinking about routing, I don't think. The Axemen with a lot of damage that they can do quite quickly. Ranadine Pikemen, both units of them moving forward first. Black Wolves revealing themselves, so now we can get a better look actually at the Rudar army. Ranadine Berserkers there. Yeah, he has got the Ranadine Rangers. So Ranadine Rangers and Black Wolves it's looking like with the hidden units that he had, but that's actually interesting. So not a lot of thrown projectiles here from Rudar, I must say, which is kind of against the grain for them. One of the things that most Rudar players will utilise to their fullest effect will be the axe throws and the javelins. To forego most of that in your roster is interesting, but they do still have a lot of damage they can do in melee with that sort of army, to be fair. The Black Wolves, the Witch Realm Enslavers, a lot of good stuff. Meanwhile, the Gondor Militia Archers at this point have sort of pulled out their blades and their target shields, and are going to try and help the Axemen of the Sarnak kill off the Haradrim Spearmen as quickly as they're able. And you can see we've only been gone a short while, and already the Haradrim Spearmen are starting to fall away very, very quickly indeed. And the Axemen of Lasarnak, they're taking a couple of losses, of course. Axemen like this, even with the armour upgrades, will take losses, but the armour upgrades will certainly help against the Haradrim Spearmen. It will make the Axemen much tougher to kill, because obviously it's only very basic attacks the Haradrim Spearmen have. And And that's going to make the Axemen of Lasarnak clean up in terms of kills there. They're probably already up to around the 100 kills. Obviously, they still haven't paid for themselves, though, because it's such a basic unit. Meanwhile, you can see here the Champions of the White Hand did come forward. It looks as though they... I don't know if they actually did charge in. It would have been fairly suicidal if they did. Then they would have burrowed their way all the way to the Guards of Osgiliath, which would have left them hideously exposed. Still the Lurtz hunting back, firing away, and to be fair, the Champions of the White Hand putting pressure on has meant that the Guards of Osgiliath need to move forward into the firing line of the Lurtz hunting pack. Isengard, meanwhile, have shifted most of their army around to this side, which does interest me a little bit, because honestly, I would be more tempted to face off against the Gondorian position than this one. The Harland Guard are wasting a lot of their ammunition, to be fair. But over here, just... maybe they didn't see the Wardens of Elos Tyrion, but if I knew that they were up there on that hill, I would not willingly want to go up this way. I would if it would further my team's goals, but not if I had a choice in the matter. Honestly, Isengard might be better off just going right through the middle of this encampment, to be honest with you. Just going right through here. Very narrow, and that will be a bit of a problem if you come under javelin fire, especially from Linden, but there's not a lot of defences there. And flooding over the defenders while using your manpower as much best you can is, I think, the attacker's best hope of winning this fight. Sending in units individually, like Harad are doing at the moment, though, is certainly not the way to go. The Southron Warband at least are AP, so they will do a little bit more damage against the heavily armoured Axemen of Lasarnak here, but they're still hopelessly outgunned in melee. In terms of stats, while they may have AP, they're still a lower-end spear unit, and they're going up against a very accomplished axe unit here. And they're getting pasted into the dirt, Harad throwing yet more of their valuable manpower under the bus, although now the Mahud Berserkers are coming in. They do receive a full frontal volley, actually, from the Gondor Militia Archers, and with their very limited armour, that is enough to kill off over 10 of them. And now the Gondorian web of archers is going to come into its own, the Gondor Archers. With the militia holding them in place, the Gondorian archers are now going to be able to shoot into the Mahud Berserkers, and that's a huge problem for the Haradrim infantry. Especially for a unit like this, which is unshielded. Obviously, most of the Mahoods, in fact all of the Mahoods, don't really put too much stock in armour. They prefer to go into battle mostly shirtless and wearing nothing but war paint. And now 2 units of Gondor archers are just teeing off into them. So this is obviously exactly the sort of thing which Gondor need. They need to start bleeding away the manpower of the attackers. Some more Mahud warriors on the way forward. The Southron archers have been shooting all this time into the Gondorian position, but based on the amount of corpses on the floor, you can tell they haven't really done much in the way of damage. And that's not terribly surprising, because even the Gondor militia archers are pretty good at standing up to arrows, and the rest of the Gondorian line is even more heavily armoured than they are, so when it comes to withstanding arrow fire, the Gondorians certainly aren't hurting for strength. Rudar clansmen moving forward, so they have actually managed to push Linden back a little bit, but you can imagine those Harland Guard are going to open up fairly soon. Rudar and Isengard combining their forces. Yeah, I'd say that Gondor, honestly, in terms of withstanding archer fire, they're probably right up there alongside the dwarves with how well they're able to do that. Meanwhile, Isengard are going to start moving through the middle, and still the Lurtz hunting pack are one of the first units in. And this is a big push, this. Rudar coming forward with a lot of swordsmen, the clansmen also moving up with their spears, and this is going to elicit a response from both Gondor and Linden. They're actually in danger of getting themselves a little bit surrounded here as they move into the makeshift archery range of this encampment. Harland infantry and Axemen of Lasarnak combining their forces. Harland infantry, of course, providing the skill. Axemen of Lasarnak providing the AP. The ballista is also right in position as well to get very nice shots into the Rudar position. Slightly better morale than the other evil men, including Harad. So they will stand their ground under this sort of punishment a little bit better. This is going to be an interesting engagement, though. The Black Wolds are here, and I would imagine that this is going to be a perfect target for the Linden archers, indeed it is. But in melee, particularly against the Gondorians, the Black Wolds will be a bit of a problem. They're probably going to want to avoid them. But you can also see that tit for tat, while the Linden archers are getting shots onto the attackers, the Rudar archers are also getting shots onto the defenders. It's going to be bad for Linden in particular as well, because their armour is really not on the same level as the Gondorians. So they are going to be much more vulnerable to the attackers' skirmishers. That ballista, though, is in almost an ideal position. They couldn't have planned it any better. The defenders going right down the avenue of the attackers as they're caught between the defenders, and then there's the Black Wolds, who are doing very well, actually, against the Harland infantry, and actually the Linden elves shaken in the face of the savage men of Rudauer. Look at these Gondor militia archers. They've taken a ton of damage, and that comes, I believe, yeah, from the Uruk-hai crossbowmen. Although, to be fair, Gondor probably won't care too much that the crossbow bolts are being used on militia archers. They'd probably be far more concerned if they were being used on infantry. The Gondorians still holding on to this high ground. The Lurtz hunting pack came over here. And unfortunately for them, they are just sort of being overwhelmed on all sides. Although it is good to see that the Gondorian cavalry has also revealed itself. The Mithrandir's retinue getting some cycle charges into the back of the Haradrim infantry. The Southron archers are also completely open to assault over here. Not that they've been all that effective so far anyway, but it's basically 3 kills for a unit of heavily armoured lancers like them. Very nicely done indeed. Flattening them, and they'll be able to cycle charge between them and the Harad front line, which will be necessary actually, because the Harad front line now, there's enough manpower now that they're starting to cause a bit of a problem for the Gondorians, though the Axemen are still doing a very resolute job at holding the line. They'll be able to do a lot of damage even if they are ultimately defeated. These Lurtz hunting pack, they need to be attacked by something else though, because Gondor archers alone are not going to cut it. There's also only a very thin line of guards of Osgiliath here, so it's good to see that Isengard are going to be moving forward, albeit their crossbows are charging right on into the pikes. I think that's just a misclicked order there, as the Isengard forces are probably going to try and shoot the guards of Osgiliath with their crossbows and open up another avenue of assault into the encampment. Those Uruk-hai crossbows still firing away. I'd be going after the Fountain Guard if I were them. That is a juicy, juicy target for crossbows to go after. And you can see now that over here, thanks to the support of the Linden archers, it does look as though the defenders are going to be victorious over here, but certainly not for free. The Black Wolves in particular have certainly not disgraced themselves in melee, but once again, the Axemen of the Sarnak proving to be a solid, solid pick here in melee, as Rudauer finally lose the stomach for their fight. Over here, Rudauer clansmen starting to rout off, but the attacks, of course, have got far more manpower where that came from. Looks as though Rudauer are going to send up another wave, Dunman Spearmen, and in this case, where there's a lot of archers, wave-based assaults may not be the worst thing. Because if you send up all your units all at once, you're going to attract the full attention of all the rangers and javelins to blitz your army down quite quickly. Whereas as it is, if you send up waves, as they're doing now, because these waves are not like thin, weedy things consisting of 1 or 2 units, they're sort of more genuine. The defenders have to treat them seriously, but they can't afford to send all their resources to stopping them. I feel as though that balance is what's going to win or lose this battle for the defenders. The Guards of Osgiliath are not in an ideal position, they're kind of surrounded. But having said that, you know, friendly fire and the javelins are causing a lot of trouble for the Uruk-hai pikemen as well. What is going on over here? The Mithrandir's retinue getting right up into the guts of the Haradrim army, going after the Hashari. The Hashari, though, much like a lot of the higher tier Elven units, have got the melee skill to actually somewhat dodge a charge, and while there are dead Hashari on the floor, I feel as though this unit would have been flattened if not for their melee skill. Still, the Hashari are sort of dragging one of their swords along the ground. You can see now Demons of the Desert, the Serpent's Fangs, so Harad still have a good amount of strength back here as well. But Harad, I feel like, are the ones that have taken the most in the way of damage here, certainly. And I feel as though the Mithrandir's retinue is a big part of that. They've done a lot of damage, cycle charging in and out. Most of the Southron archers at this point have been defeated, and still Harad have not really been able to overcome this initial defence that the Gondorians had laid out for them. But they are at the very least keeping the Mithrandir's retinue attention away from the other forces, although I say that they're now going to go over here. Lango needs to hope that those crossbows don't see the Mithrandir's retinue, because if they do, it's going to be a big problem for them. And you can see now the Gondorians, a lot of Gondor infantry coming in here, Uruk-hai infantry, the line infantry are both colliding. The Gondorian cavalry charging into the back of the Uruk-hai infantry. Will the crossbows get a volley off onto them? No. So yeah, that Gondorian cavalry, and that is the benefit to the Gondorian cavalry, it's really very resilient. Here you can see the Gondorian infantry actually pursuing some rousing crossbowmen. They're a little bit out in the open now though, getting a little bit further away from their defensive positions. Rudauer's second wave has arrived, but there's a couple of Black Wolves still alive actually from the initial assault. But Dunman Spearmen are not really what's going to be needed against Harland infantry. You still see though the Dunman Hunters have been providing overwatch fire this whole time. Looks like they're out of ammunition now though, pulling out their hand axes. They're obviously not going to be great in melee, but still, every man will count as the attackers continue to try and force their way further into the settlement. And much like, you know, most sieges, if the attackers can force one wing of the defenders to crumble, they should be able to flood in then and do horrendous damage to the other side. So it's a delicate balancing act here. The defenders need to keep all of their front lines secure, because losing just one could be horrendously costly for them. But this Mithrandir's retinue is still doing a really good job here. Cycle charging in and out, and with that, the Gondorian anvil is also holding very firm. The Axemen of Lasarnak and Gondor infantry fighting side by side, and yet again, looks like another rear charge coming in from the Mithrandir's retinue. Not the best charge, but there's also not a huge amount of Uruk-hai left on this front line. The AP of the Axemen being used to good effect. Uruk-hai crossbows that are out of ammunition, I would assume, getting in behind enemy lines. Going after the Pelagia Marines, actually, and there's a lot of dead Pelagia Marines, so I would assume the crossbows have been trying to kill them. Not the worst target, to be fair. But I feel as though the Gondor infantry shaken now, after taking a rear charge from the crossbows. Southron Warband coming in, a little bit of chaos ensuing. The Haradrim finally able to break through here, and they're also sending up Trollmen, 2 units of Trollmen, so at this point, the Haradrim have had enough of trying to wear Gondor down. They're going to try and smash them to pieces, and this will be enough, I think. Gondor are going to have to pull back. There's no way they'll be able to withstand the Trollman, given the fight they've already had with the Uruk-hai, even with the support of the Mithrandir's retinue, who have done very well, but I feel as though they're coming to the end of their effectiveness. There's only 8 of them remaining. Let's see what Rudau is doing. You can also see that there's still the Franadine Rangers are shooting now. And they're going after the Fountain Guard, I think, which is definitely the right target to go after. Yeah, that is. Body-piercing projectiles going into the Fountain Guard. Definitely the right choice. They may have thick armour, the Fountain Guard, but they are unshielded, and they're so good that if you can kill off enough of them, very worthwhile use of the Rangers there. Having said that, there's still a lot of arrow fire coming in here from the Athelian Rangers as well, so mutually assured destruction. Although, having said that, the Athelian Rangers are only being used on Dunman Hunters and Spearmen. So the value that they're really getting off themselves is questionable, but considering the defenders do have 3 Rangers at their disposal, maybe not the worst thing in the world. Harland infantry still fighting hard against these Dunmen. Still, let's see what's happening over here. Ranadine Rangers perhaps shifting their target now to the Guards of Osgiliath and the Gondor Archers, who are sort of intermingled with one another. It's a pretty big blob of Gondorians, to be fair, so maybe another good choice. Guards of Osgiliath maybe not quite as strong as the Fountain Guard, but they're still very vulnerable to archer fire like that. Gondor infantry being left as a rear guard to try and allow the Gondorians to retreat. And they will hold for a little while, but against Trollmen, Trollmen are definitely one of those units that Gondor are going to be quite afraid of. Definitely a good unit to bring against Gondor. You can also see back there that the Champions of the White Hand springing forth now. I'm actually a little bit surprised that they weren't used earlier to try and shut down the Mithrandir's retinue, because it caused havoc in Harad and Isengard's lines, and Champions of the White Hand would be ideally placed to deal with multiple HP lancers like that. A bit further back there, but yeah, obviously Gondor infantry and what was left of the Pelagia Marines being utterly vanquished. And actually, this is only Gondor infantry over here as well, so again, another frontal charge from the Champions of the White Hand could be quite devastating. Although the Guards of Osgiliath are on hand also to prevent Isengard from simply waltzing in with their mounted units, and also the Pelagia Marines are there, which I didn't see. Javelins absolutely to be avoided for the Champions of the White Hand. You can see that the defenders being pushed further and further back inside the encampments at this point. Gondor Militia Archers moving forward. Still this small fight continuing, with some Gondor Militia trying to come to the aid of the Elves. The Gondorian Ballista starting to fire a few more bolts over in this direction. Champions of Nathrat taking up a position on the hill. Hashari are moving forward. I mean, there's another way they can move in over here. And Gondor are going to have to set up another defence over here because they're already engaged. And more than that, they're engaged with a pretty decent amount of their infantry over here. Having said that, Harad are taking horrendous losses now from both Gondor and Linden Javelins. That's not the way they want to be losing their Trollmen. And also, the Guards of Osgiliath should be able to hold them in place for long enough for these Javelins to really do their thing. So definitely a good engagement this for the defenders, in spite of taking some losses on the retreat, as you normally expect. And also this is also good to see. Isengard coming to the aid of Harad now. They're going to need to charge in quickly though. The 4 Linden Marines may be spears in melee, but taking a charge from the Champions of the White Hand would be hideously damaging for them, although that wasn't maybe the best charge. Pathing in these narrow spaces though might be a little bit difficult. Oh, hello. The Hashari using their throwing knives to do yet more damage to the defensive lines over here. Linden and Gondor putting up a front against the Black Wolds. Rudau's swordsmen, so yeah, you can see now that this area of the encampment now has become the primary battleground. I think there is a way you can get in and around here as well, but that of course will put you at the mercy of all of those archers. So 3 front lines revealing themselves. The Fountain Guard and the Harland Infantry should be just fine at holding Rudauer at bay. Over here with the Black Wolds, maybe with the addition of those pikes and the Trollshaw axe throwers, so they do have some axe throwers, Rudau, which is good. They're going to need them. They'll be ideal actually against the Fountain Guard when they're unshielded. Oof. That drop in frame rate somehow tells me that there are rangers somewhere doing some killing. Yeah, they're over here. What is going on here? Where are the rangers actually that are shooting? Because I noticed the blood spray. Can't be the Forlinder Marines. Well, the champions of the White Hand getting in behind the lines at this point. Must have been the Athelian Rangers, I assume. Forlinder Marines are here, but they're not, I don't think, well, they might be able to actually get some javelins off. And Isengard losing their bottle. And they are going to take a javelin volley to the back. If they should have just followed through on that charge, because they would have made it. They actually didn't take any losses there, the champions of the White Hand, being as tanky as they are. But over on this front line, it was actually looking pretty grim for Harad at one point. But with the support from Isengard, it looks as though they are now going to hack their way through. The Hashari are also using their throwing knives. I don't know where they're using them though. You can see here the Fountain Guard, spear to spear with the Uruk-hai pikemen. I think the Trollshaw Axers are trying to get into a position to throw their axes, but they're not really able to do so. They're sort of getting far too close to the melee engagement for comfort. Champions of the White Hand right back here in the guts of the defenders' positions. And they're actually getting a nice charge into the ballista there. A bold foray into enemy territory, this, from the Isengard cavalry. They need to be careful though. Going after the ballista crew too greedily is going to net them an appointment with the Mithlon pikemen, and they're trying to kill the siege, and that may cost them the champions of the White Hand. That could be a critical error, this, because they're not going to escape from this, I don't think. Cavalry in... I don't know whether it's in 0.97 or whether it's been there before, but cavalry has a real tendency of getting stuck on pikemen when they get there. It's easy to avoid pikes with cavalry, but when they're there, it's really hard to get them out. And they took a lot of losses there, and honestly I think the champions of the White Hand might have been better off trying to support the frontline engagement, rear-charging in, doing a lot of damage that way. Isengard meanwhile closing in with the Mithlon Marines, being overwhelmed with Uruk-hai pikemen at this point. And now the Uruk-hai infantry pushing up with some trollmen to really do some additional damage here. I think the defenders at this point are sort of thinking about slowly retreating to that hill over there, which Linden had deployed on very early in the match. The Hashari are still here. The Fountain Guard, meanwhile, are just going beast mode against the Uruk-hai pikemen and Black Wolds, with the support of those Linden elves as well. Definitely a very good engagement for the defenders. Elsewhere, the defenders actually victorious over here. It was only basic Rudauer swordsmen they were facing off against, but yeah, you can see at this point the defenders certainly trying to sort of siphon off as many resources as they can to the hill. Fountain Guard retreating, the Athelian Rangers trying to shoot. There goes the champions of the White Hand, charging into the Forlinder Marines, and of course, Forlinder Marines, spears in melee, on the verge of wavering, but managing to kill off the Isengard general before they do so. In come the Trolls of the White Hand, I think finally sick of the defenders holding on to the centre of the encampment. Isengard is going to send forward a real juggernaut of a unit in the Trolls of the White Hand to try and wipe away any resistance. They could close quickly with the Athelian Rangers actually and force them to stop firing. You can see here the dismounted Serpent Guard are actually trying to sort of squeeze through as well. And that is the key at this point for the attackers. They need to stop the Athelian Rangers firing, because the more volleys they get off into the attackers as they move forward, the less manpower they're going to have to try and finish off the defenders in the late game. The Athelian Rangers will be able to wriggle away from this, of course, and they will run. Harland and Guard are going to be able to shoot now. Wardens Velos, Tyrion revealing themselves, and Alder and Blade Masters still in perfect health. Fountain Guard, I think, now moving forward to try and cover the retreat of the Rangers. Serpent Guard trying to push their way forward. The Ballista remounting. In spite of taking that charge, they are still alive, but only hitting their own tents with their bolts. Harland and Infantry trying to block the attackers up, I would assume, so that they can get good shots off on them with their archers, but with Trolls of the White Hand, Uruk-hai Berserkers in here as well. It's only a matter of time before the Harland infantry is completely vanquished, especially now that they're being attacked from the rear by dismounted Serpent Guard as well, and the final dregs of Linden resistance being put to the sword. These Fountain Guard though, still 49 of them remaining. They're not going to be something you can send just anything against and hope that they win either. They're going to need something significant, otherwise the Fountain Guard could come from behind and do some damage. Rudar still have some forces out there, some Dunman Spears, some Rudar Clansmen. They're enslavers as well, so they're going to have reinforcements still outside the encampment that they can use. A couple of kills there on Uruk-hai Berserkers, but didn't get any hits actually on the Trolls of the White Hand. In come the Hashari. Don't know what they hope to accomplish though. Yeah, they're going to get forward and they're going to immediately get shot up. Assassin type units like this are always going to be vulnerable if you get them in the range of archers, rangers in particular. Even in melee though, the Fountain Guard are, with the relative strength of both units at this point, the Fountain Guard are easily going to be able to defeat them. But we are now in to the final phases of the fight, and the attackers still have all of their important units left, it must be said. Harad still have their Champions of Nafrat, they still have their Serpent's Fangs, their Demons of the Desert. So I think they still have their Serpent's Fangs. I may have lost them. The rest of the Rudar army coming forward, adding their numbers to the fight, which is going to be important. They're going to need cannon fodder here of some description, the attackers, as they move in to the defenders. Very nicely fortified position up on this hill. The Hashari still trying to... what are they going after there? Trying to go after the Frowned Pikemen at this point. Yeah, the Fountain Guard. Actually taking a bit of friendly fire, I think, from their support on the hill. But surrounded by the Frowned units as they are. The Fountain Guard stats may be much better than like your average pikeman, but without phalanx they can still be vulnerable to this sort of problem where their unit their formation's broken. Rudar though showing no signs of slowing down, and this is going to be a pretty key moment. Isengard are going to need to follow them in. A few sort of basic farmsteads here at the back. What's left of Isengard and, well, what's left of Harad, I should say, and Isengard are a little bit healthier, it looks like, but they're going to need to follow Rudar in here as they get ready and in position. Good to see that the defenders are being wise with their ammunition, though, because they know that most of what Rudar is sending forward is basic units. They don't want to utilise their ammunition on them. They want to save their ammunition for Harad's elites and Isengard's more heavy-duty troops, rather than just this basic stuff from Rudar. A lot of savage Northmen. Some javelins being utilised, but of course, as long as they don't use all of their ammunition on this clump of Rudar forces, the defenders are absolutely doing the right thing in this situation. Fountain Guard moving in, obviously. Gondor no longer completely dependent on the Fountain Guard in 0.97, but they're still a very strong unit, as we've seen in this battle. Forward come Isengard. Now, the Trolls of the White Hand could be key here, and also the fact that Isengard could move through this clump of tents over here and circumvent this frontal defence while Rudar hold them in place. They're going to need to be quick though, because Rudar, while they may have slightly buffed morale, these are still only basic units without really much in the way of support from buffers. And a few direct ballista hits, you know, they're looking like they're going to rout. Isengard can't afford to lose their bottle here, they need to follow through. It's going to be interesting to see whether the defenders can hold this hilltop as the attackers converge on them. Branded Pikemen are moving forward. Rudar still have a pretty decent amount of forces camped just out there, to be honest. Branded Pikemen being shot by Harland and Guard. I think at this point Rudar kind of needs to attack from this angle as well, go this way. And that is exactly what they're doing. So besiege pretty much on all sides. If they wanted to retreat, they could still go down here if they really wanted to, but I think at this point it's do or die for the defenders. They're going to have to hold this ground or they're going to have to die trying. Obviously against the Rudar forces they're not going to have too much to worry about. The Trolls I think are a concern. If the Trolls can get into this engagement and do damage, it's a lot of manpower for them to lose. The Ballista though proving to be a good bring from Gondor. Just a basic Ballista as well. I think perhaps he was expecting to see an Isengard Ballista. I would be expecting to see an Isengard Ballista as well, because it's a very useful tool for Isengard to use to really put some pressure on a defensive position. So accurate and so damaging. Maybe hoping to snipe it out, but considering that that didn't materialise, they're now able to use it in this way. That's going to be very nice as well. Athelian Rangers getting in the way of the Trolls, as are the Nars Kaya coming in as well. But Javelins are here. Veterans of Osgiliath firing away. There's still 5 Champions of the White Hand, though, and getting a lot of damage done there on the Mithlon Marines. They are on the same level as Knights after all, the Champions of the White Hand. Even when they're depleted like this, they're still very, very dangerous. And there you can see the Serpent's Fangs are still alive, because you can see the black trails that their poison arrows leave. I don't feel as though routing is going to be too much of a problem for Gondor and Lindon at this stage, however. If it does become a problem, it's because they're on the verge of losing anyway. Wardens of Alos Tyrion are there. Rudau are attacking from this angle as well. The Witch Realm Enslavers taking point. Getting into the Wardens of Alos Tyrion and the Harlingen Garden, they have a real advantage there. Granadine Berserkers, so yeah, this is where Rudau's main strength is, attacking from this side of the hill. The Noldorin Blade Masters are needed to be committed somewhere, I think. Veterans of Osgiliath withstanding the Champions of the White Hand a lot better, actually, and they are very accomplished in melee. Maybe not as damaging as the Caer Andros Marksmen, but certainly a tough unit nonetheless. The Defenders' front line, though, is holding very firm over here, and I feel as though a big part of that is the Fountain Guard and the Mithlond Pikemen fighting in tandem with one another. Those are 2 very powerful phalanx units, and unless you can force your way through, we're going to be in a bit of trouble there. The Serpent's Fangs, I think, are going to try and get into a position to shoot into its back, but the Trolls are almost gone. They're trying to get into the Ballista, I think, but not really being allowed to. Wardens of Alos Tyrion are now also going to start shooting, and they've got a perfect shot in there. So actually from the front, the attacks are starting to struggle. I was about to say that their best hope is for Rudau to smash through over here. In spite of losing their general, they should still manage that, to be honest with you. It's a bit of a skeleton crew back here from Lindon trying to hold on for dear life as the Granadine Berserkers and the Witch Realm Enslavers lead a bunch of Rudau swordsmen into melee. And with those 2 elites from Rudau leading the way, they will get through here eventually, and then the defenders will have to worry about being attacked from this angle as well. The Ballista will be wide open, and I think the Ballista just needs to try and fire as much as it can before it is inevitably engaged. The Trolls still refusing to die, and I feel as though a big part of that is just the fact that the Noldorin Blade Masters have not been able to get a hold of them in melee as well as they would like. Because if they did, they would fall away pretty quickly, but as it is, they've been going after lower damage units, and Trolls can withstand that sort of punishment for a long time. There's Demons of the Desert in here as well. More nice volleys from the Ballista there. It's only a matter of time before this front line routes, and you can see here some of it already is. The Serpent Guard and the Granadine Pikemen holding their ground a little longer, but the defenders need this because their backs are very much to the wall here. It's only a matter of time here before Rudau break through over here, and if they don't have anything to respond to that quickly, they will be in real trouble. As Trollmen, Mithlon Marines are moving in. They still have their Javelins as well. What are they going to go after, I wonder? Trollmen? They are going to go after the Trollmen, and that should be enough to more or less kill that unit. Well, I say that. They withstood that pretty well. But the Mithlon Marines are no pushovers in melee. With them being as depleted as they are, they should be able to hold out. Veterans of Osgiliath and more Wardens of Alos Tyrion. I'd assume they're out of ammunition at this point, but just about managing to stop Rudau from flooding in to their hilltop position. And the Veterans of Osgiliath, they still have ammunition. They'll be able to provide a little bit of support. Maybe not as damaging as perhaps the defenders would like, but beggars can't be choosers. The Noldorin Blade Masters coming down here. I think maybe because they... Ooh, and that is nasty. The Demons of the Desert being targeted. Quite unsurprisingly, I must say. The Champions of Nathrat are still hanging back, but I feel as though Harad, they need to move in. Like, if they had moved everything in all at once here, the attackers, I feel as though the defenders just wouldn't have had the strength to withstand them. As it is, they're actually running out of manpower to the extent on this side where the defenders may be pulling this back. The Noldorin Blade Masters will be able to go toe-to-toe individually with anything they have left. They could still pull this back in their favour, though, the attackers, by using their Demons of the Desert now. This could be pretty devastating, and indeed, you know, that's going to be very devastating for the Mithlon Marines, but they're also taking Javelin fire from another unit of Mithlon Marines, and now they're going to get engaged in melee. The Serpent's Fangs are over here somewhere still. And yeah, I mean, at this point, the defenders, it looks as though they have managed to turn this around. Rudau swordsmen are routing, I'd assume, because of taking point-blank fire from the Veterans of Osgiliath, and now Harlingen Guard coming to reinforce the Wardens of Alos Tyrion. Yeah, Rudau are not going to break through here at the back of the hill. And I feel as though that's because reinforcements have been allowed to come over here because Harad wasn't quite bold enough pressing up through the main avenue of attack. I mean, they took horrendous losses, yes. But like I said earlier, if you have to take horrendous losses so that your ally can win you the game, you've got to do it. Especially if you're one of the evil factions. I mean, it's not as if they're too shy about losing manpower. The Hashari trying to shank these Mythlon Marines. Another unit of Mythlon Marines over here. Not a force to be taken lightly from Harad over here. And honestly, these Noldorin Blade Masters could be in trouble here because they're up against the Champions of Nafrat and the Serpent's Fangs. With the two of them together, they should be able to defeat the mighty Linden Blade Masters. It'll still be a bloody fight, but this isn't the worst engagement for the defenders either, though, because it means that these two very elite units are bottled up fighting one unit in a choke point, which is more often than not going to be something the defenders want to happen. Certainly here it is. The veterans of Osgiliath are going to come to the aid of them as well. The Fountain Guard, I think, perhaps feeling as though they can win this fight without range support, which is maybe a bit bold because the Witch Realm Enslavers are over here still fighting hard. Maybe they hope the Fountain Guard with their Phalanx will be enough, but I don't know. I mean, these are two strong Rudauer units. And if the attackers are going to win this, it will be on the back of their elites, because they really have nothing left other than their elites at this point, Harad and Rudauer. Hashari, finishing off these Mythlon Marines and Pikemen. Gondor, actually no, that's the Ballista crew, facing off against the Southron Archers. Wet noodle fight. And then you can see near these floating tents. That's rather interesting. I didn't actually notice that when we were zoomed out. What a marvellous thing perspective is. But regardless, the Serpent's Fangs will be able to defeat the Mythlon Marines easily. Players admitted defeat. That's got to be Isengard because they're the only ones without anything left. Veterans of Osgiliath now backing up the Noldorin Blade Masters, and now it's actually the other way around. The Champions of Nafrat are the ones being 2v1'd. And they will lose. Having said that, the Veterans of Osgiliath will not enjoy being in melee with the Champions of Nafrat at all. And it's tricky this for the defenders because I feel as though they're sort of on the verge of running out of resources, and choosing to send their Veterans of Osgiliath away from this fight was a big call, but it looks as though the Fountain Guard might be enough to help the Wardens of Alos Tyrion win this fight. And I feel as though, honestly, this could be the fight which determines everything. Whoever wins this will have just a few men to help reinforce elsewhere on the field. And that could be what makes the difference. And the Phalanx of the Fountain Guard, defeat is a distinct possibility. I mean, certainly in terms of stats, you would back Rudauer here. We shall see. The Hashari are doing a really good job here of ripping through these Mythlonders. And the Ballista crew, I think, is also fine. No, it's very much a fight among the low tiers here, but Southron Archers, as shitty as they are, should be able to defeat a Ballista crew in melee. The Serpent's Fangs should be able to win this fight as well, so looking around all these fights, to be honest with you, the Veterans of Osgiliath still have ammo. And honestly, that might be what wins or loses the defenders this fight. If the Veterans of Osgiliath had stayed on that hill for just a little bit longer, fired a few more volleys into the Witch Realm Enslavers and Paradine Berserkers, that could have been what made a big difference in this fight. Because as it is, the attackers are narrowly winning most fights on the field here. The Demons of the Desert, there's only 3 of them. The Veterans of Osgiliath will be enough to kill them. But I don't know. I mean, the Noldorin Blade Masters' victory seems certain. The Champions of Nafrat are fighting them to a standstill, which is impressive in its own way. But this hasn't really been a fair fight between the two of them. The Serpent's Fangs were helping them initially, then the Veterans of Osgiliath came over and helped the Noldorin Blade Masters. So, yeah. Getting recharged though, I mean, saving the Noldorin Blade Masters is more of a concern here than saving the Mythlon Marines, I'd say. Oh, and he's going after the Serpent's Fangs. I don't know if I'd do that. Oh, see that Demon of the Desert there. I mean, with the Demons of the Desert still alive, I suppose that makes a good deal more sense. Because the Serpent's Fangs should still be able to defeat the Veterans of Osgiliath. Meanwhile, what is going on up here? The Fountain Guard just fighting their hearts out alongside the Wardens of Alos Tyrion here. Will it be enough? I don't think it is going to be enough, though. The Phalanx might be enough to save them here, but I don't think it is, because they've got some men just coming around from the sides. And the armour piercing on both of these units is going to be punishing for the Fountain Guard whenever they do get hit by a weapon attack. And there goes the Harad General. I think maybe the Champions of Nafrat, now that it's just sort of a one... Yeah, when it became a one-on-one fight between the two, the Noldorin Blade Masters did start to assert their dominance a little bit. Now they need to move forward and help out the Veterans of Osgiliath, because if they don't, the Serpent Fangs will beat them in melee. But this is where the Veterans of Osgiliath being very tough to kill comes into play. They may not be able to win this fight, they'll be able to hold for a long time. Southron Archers, after beating the Ballista crew, the Ashari were actually defeated in the end by those Mithlon Marines. Meanwhile, here come the Noldorin Blade Masters, and that will be enough to swing this fight in favour of the defenders, and the defenders might just have this now. Because over here, I don't think Rudauer, even if they do end up winning, which it doesn't look like they're actually going to now, Hranadine Berserkers, the defensive values on the Hranadine Berserkers, clearly not enough. And the Fountain Guard, so it does look as though the defenders are just about going to have enough. And I think the difference could have been made if Harad had just committed forward one more unit during the initial phase of this assault. That could have been what swings the battle, because when it's fine margins like this, you can really make any minor difference in favour of one side or the other to really choose what decided the match. And yeah, I don't really see a way back into this for the attackers now. I mean, the Southron Archers are not going to be able to do the amount of damage required to kill off the Noldorin Blade Masters, not with their armour. One of the few Linden units to be able to withstand that sort of punishment. I really like the look of the Serpent's Fangs, to be honest. I like the fact that they use those big show tails, and the colour scheme and the armour as well, the sort of the mask. Very nice unit indeed. Veterans of Osgiliath fighting side by side with them though. And the alliance which felled Angmar is going to be able to hold the line, if only just. Very, very slender victory this is going to be. The Fountain Guard, though, showing once again why they are so feared, able to hold that line, and it was a bold move by Lango, because I would have been very tempted to keep my Veterans of Osgiliath up here just for a couple more volleys at least. But he moved them down, and that, again, my way of doing that may well have lost us this battle if I had been there, because the Veterans of Osgiliath, without them down here when they came, could have caused Harad to win this fight. Noldorin Blade Masters killing the Southron Archers off, having enough of their nonsense. The Serpent's Fangs, they're going to break any moment now. They're wavering and tired. Actually, they're only shaken. I think actually over here, the Roman Slavers, they're still eager. There they go. Harad gone. And so Rudal are the last attacker standing. But the Fountain Guard and the Wardens of Elos Tyrian holding the line like champions up here. So close as well. I mean, yeah, 1% in it. There was what? There can be like no more than 40 men left standing for the defenders. Very impressive fight. So I can see why Lango was so eager for me to show this one, because not a huge amount of mistakes made by either side, to be honest. So there's not really anything I can pick on. I could say that perhaps Isengard could have used their champions, the White Hand, to try and zone out the Mithrandir's retinue a little bit better. But that's easier said than done, because if the Mithrandir's retinue sees the champions, the White Hand coming, it's just going to run away, because it's going to be able to outpace the wargs. But even so, very, very good work from the defenders. They layered their defence in exactly the way you should. Layering the defence or sending your attacks forward in waves is usually something which I see done incorrectly, to be fair. Like the waves or the layers are too small and easy to withstand or smash through. But in this case, I feel as though both the attackers and the defenders, they got the scale just right. The size of the layers was good. The amount of attackers sent forward in each wave was also good. And so that's good to see, because I feel as though, with how often I complain about wave-based attacking and defending, that it's always a bad idea when it's not. It is a very good idea sometimes, and I feel as though that is very well seen in this fight. But let's see what did the damage for Lango's army. He did get the most kills overall, after all, I assume, from his archers. Axemen of Lasarnak in the early phase of the fight were very, very good. You know, they may have only been going up against very basic units. They also withstood some Uruk-hai, to be fair. But very, very good return on them. And it does go to show that you can't just send very basic units. That is something maybe Harad could have done a little bit better. They sent forward just individual spearmen forwards early on, and they just got monstered by the Axemen of Lasarnak. And then obviously, you know, basically 3 kills, and then they were able to help hold the line alongside the Gondor infantry as well. The veterans of Osgiliath doing very well in the late game, obviously, very, very key pillar to their defences. Obviously the Fountain Guard. I feel as though the Fountain Guard deserve the MVP status for Gondor here, just because that one unit, if it didn't manage to withstand Rudau's 2 most powerful infantry units alongside the Wardens of Alos Tyrion, the defenders would have lost this, because Rudau would have been able to come to the aid of Harad, and it would have been game over. Pelagia Marines, it's a little bit difficult to keep track of ranged units, but fairly decent returns on some of these lads. Athelian Rangers obviously doing very well, as you'd expect, but Mithrandir's retinue getting 431 kills, and that does go to show that maybe they were left alone to wreak havoc among the lines of the attackers for too long. And I do feel as though Isengard were the ones with the best tools to deal with them, be it the crossbows or the champions of the White Hand. They maybe could have shut them down sooner than they did. And if they did, then obviously the kills that the Mithrandir's retinue got, just recouping, you know, even one charge, you know, would have been enough, I think, to tilt this battle in the other direction. But a very, very good fight. Big thank you to Lino for sending this one to me. Good to see Gondor and Lindon fighting side by side to defeat the forces of evil. I'm not sure what will be next. I still have a lot of replays to work my way through. I'm trying to. It's become a little bit more difficult to sort of do these replays whenever I want now, because I've got a lot of hours booked in for my part-time job during the summer. I'm a little bit concerned actually to how that will affect my ability to do this when I'm back at university. Obviously I won't have as much hours at work then, but I will have that in addition to my sort of university stuff as well. So we'll see, I suppose. It's I should be able to do at least 3 videos a week still, but it may be just a case of like the odd video here and there being cut. But still, that's a matter for a month's time. We still have a month of the same sort of schedule to go. So yeah, big thank you to Lango for sending this one to me once again. Big thank you to all the players for being a part of it. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.